Welcome back to Axis of Truth on JNS. I'm Emily Schrader, and today we're talking all things Qatar. The Doha Forum is underway, and boy, has it been a load of nonsense, and that's putting it generously. Plus, we're going to take a look at the latest in Iran. We're going deep inside the Kingdom of Qatar's Doha Forum. No, not the branding or the carefully staged photo ops. We're going inside the actual machine because this forum is not a place for diplomacy. It's a weapon for disinformation masquerading as dialogue. A global information operation that was built by Qatar, a state that has spent 40 years funding extremism, supporting terror groups, and undermining Western values from within. And this year, they're not even trying to hide it. The forum opened with Qatar's prime minister declaring that the world doesn't need more promises, rather it needs justice practiced by all without double standards, which sounds great, right? Except then he explained how true justice is rooted in Sharia law, something he believes must be exported around the world, and that was only the opening. Sharia law serving as the framework for global justice. Now, naturally, the rest of the program was exactly what you would expect from a state that wants to export political Islam and destroy Western civilization from within. Let's break down just a few of the speakers that Qatar strategically placed to carefully craft their nonsense narrative, which of course focuses obsessively on Israel. First off, the engine of Qatar's ideological power, Sheikha Moza bin Nasser, who is the architect of Qatar's global soft power strategy. Now, she's responsible for turning Qatar into one of the world headquarters of the Muslim Brotherhood after Egypt and Saudi Arabia had actually banned it. She also implied after October 7th that there wasn't evidence of sexual violence against Israeli women by Hamas, a blatant falsehood and deliberate rumor intended to fuel skepticism over the crimes against humanity that Hamas committed on that day. Now, under her leadership, Qatar has funded educational materials across the region that included, of course, blatant Jew hatred, praised the Muslim Brotherhood, and glorified martyrdom. This is not an allegation. It's actually well documented by multiple Western governments that have reviewed these textbooks, as well as multiple reports, independent reports. Now, Sheikha Moza does not just influence Qatar's policy, she actually defines a lot of it. Her presence at the Doha Forum signals exactly what the forum is all about: disinformation and whitewashing Islamist theocracy. Now, at this forum, Qatari officials also tried to rewrite history many times by claiming, among other things, that they only allowed Hamas to have an office in Qatar because the U.S. told them to. Let me be very, very clear. This is horseshit. And it's essential to understand that Qatar did not become a sponsor of terror with their relationship with Hamas. Long before Hamas, there were decades of support for terrorist movements, including known Muslim Brotherhood leaders and financiers of numerous terror groups globally. Now, for one, Qatar hosted Yusuf al-Qaradawi, the spiritual leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, who announced on Al Jazeera, Qatar's Al Jazeera, that all Jews everywhere are legitimate targets. Qatar also provided safe haven for Taliban leaders and allowed the Taliban to operate a political office and media center in Doha years before the United States ever entered negotiations. This helped legitimize a group responsible for mass murder and, of course, the subjugation and gender apartheid against women. Qatar has funded Libyan and Syrian Islamist militias in the Arab Spring, including groups that are directly connected to al-Qaeda. And both the U.S. Treasury and multiple European governments have called out Qatar's role in funding extremists in those wars. Now, Qatar has also been linked to ransom payments and financial channels that benefited al-Nusra and other radical terror groups. So this idea that Qatar is simply acting at the behest of the West is not only insane, but yet another exercise in Qatari gaslighting, because Qatar thinks that you're stupid. Hamas was not the beginning, Hamas was the continuation. But back to our terrorist-studded guest list of speakers, no conference of terrorism could be complete without master propagandist Javad Zarif of the Islamic Republic of Iran, along with his pathetic cronies. Of course, Javad Zarif, the former foreign minister of that Islamic regime that armed and trained Hamas for years, that built up Hezbollah, that's destroyed Lebanon, that's decimated Yemen through civil war via the Houthis, and of course that has been the world's biggest sponsor of terrorism for 46 years and counting. Well, Zarif stood on the Doha stage and said with a straight face that Iran has always stood with the oppressed. This from the government that murdered Mahsa Amini, that tortures political dissidents, that poisons schoolgirls for protesting, that kidnaps Iranians on foreign soil and executes them, and that executes gay men. Over 1,000 Iranians have been executed so far in this year alone. That ain't standing with the oppressed. That is the actions of the oppressor. But of course, at the behest of Qatar, the approved narrative was that Israel is responsible for all things bad and evil in the world. And that is exactly the delusional narrative that Zarif presented, alongside none other than the disgraced American diplomat Rob Malley, the former special envoy for Iran, who was removed from his position for mishandling classified documents. Qatar really knows how to pick 'em. And speaking of jihad lovers, Qatar also invited sanctioned Jew hater and fake lawyer Francesca Albanese, who is currently on a self-pity tour whining about being held accountable for her despicable terror support. Now, you may remember Albanese as the UN Special Rapporteur who was sanctioned by the US over her Jew-bashing obsession at the ICC. Albanese, who isn't actually a lawyer, had claimed that Jews abused the Holocaust to justify Israel's existence. She's also claimed that Israel has no right to self-defense, both in messages she repeated in Doha, where the Qataris gave her exactly what she wants most, a stage. But this absurd event really wouldn't be complete without representation from Qatari state media Al Jazeera, which has been the chief propaganda arm of Hamas for years now. Palestinian journalist Wael Dadu of Al Jazeera was there to provide the emotional narrative, lying through his teeth about the collusion between Al Jazeera and Hamas itself, as well as the numerous journalists who doubled as Hamas operatives. And when asked about Hamas, Wael said, "We must understand the root causes of resistance," as if butchering Jews in their homes and kidnapping children is resistance. No mention of the fact, of course, that Hamas uses civilians as human shields or how they execute Palestinians who oppose their thuggish crimes. But of course, Qatar also brought Omar Suleiman of the Yaqeen Institute to really hammer home that fabricated narrative that terrorism is somehow justice, from the theological perspective, of course. Now, Suleiman has argued that Palestinians have a moral right to resist by any means, the exact language that Hamas uses to justify butchering little children and raping women on October 7th. This sentiment is also echoed again by Turkey's foreign minister, Hakan Fidan, who not only defended Hamas, but said that the world must not delegitimize Palestinian resistance and stated that Hamas shouldn't disarm first to move forward into phase 2 of the peace deal in Gaza. Now, don't forget here that Qatar and Turkey are the two main state sponsors of the Muslim Brotherhood. This was a coordinated message. The Doha Forum also gave ample opportunity for Syrian jihadists as well, inviting Ahmed al-Shara to be interviewed by CNN's resident whitewasher of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Christiane Amanpour. Now, during her interview, al-Shara used the opportunity to claim that it wasn't him or al-Qaeda that were actually terrorists. It was actually the United States. Looks like someone is doing well in their anti-Western propaganda classes. He then continued on to say, well, some of his forces are actively butchering Syrian minorities, that the real terrorists are those who fund Israel. Pure Islamist propaganda. And coincidentally, the exact same message as the Islamic Republic of Iran. Speaking of which, how could any conference featuring jihadists be complete without the NIAC co-founder and Quincy Institute co-founder, as well as the Islamic Republic's favorite Western mouthpiece, Trita Parsi? Trita has spent 2 decades acting as an errand boy for the Islamic regime's foreign policy. And for the last 2 years, he's attacked Israel obsessively, every single day, on every issue, on every platform. His language isn't just sympathetic to the Islamic regime, it's identical to the regime's official propaganda. And that ain't a coincidence. No matter how unhinged and conspiratorial a claim is, Trita will be there on X, twisting himself into a pretzel to try to explain how somehow Israel is the problem with everything ever on Earth. And speaking of someone who loves anti-Semitic conspiracies, the Western right-wing troll Qatar bot Tucker Carlson was also a featured guest at the Doha Forum, along with Groyper sympathizer Donald Trump Jr. and the investors of the Tucker Carlson network, Neil Patel and Pakistani-Iranian Omid Malik. Now, naturally, Tucker wasn't in Doha as a journalist because, well, he isn't one. He did use the opportunity, however, to talk about how he plans to buy property in Qatar. No surprise there. He also went on a tangent falsely claiming that President Trump is the only U.S. president to side with an Arab state over Israel when Israel struck Qatar. This, of course, is blatantly false. In 1981, President Reagan publicly condemned the Israeli strike on the Iraqi nuclear reactor, calling it a violation of international law. He even placed a temporary freeze on F-16 aircraft deliveries to Israel as punishment. And in 1982, he publicly condemned Israeli shelling of Beirut and demanded that Israel stop. In 1991, President George Bush Sr. opposed Israeli settlement construction so strongly that he withheld $10 billion in loan guarantees. And back in the 1950s, President Eisenhower took Egypt's side in the Suez Crisis. Just as when he claimed that the UK should not have attacked Hitler in World War II, once again, we see that Tucker Carlson is relying on the profound historical illiteracy of primarily millennials and especially Gen Z. And Qatar, they get exactly what they want. An American conservative influencer perverting history in the interest of advancing Islamist Muslim Brotherhood propaganda. The real story of the Doha Forum, however, is how Qatar is running the largest anti-American campaign on Earth. The Doha Forum is not about peace or justice. It's definitely not about human rights. I mean, after all, Qatar is a modern-day slave state. No, the Doha Forum is a global platform to legitimize political Islam, to clean up the Islamic Republic's image, to undermine Western alliances, to attack Israel, and to turn the United States into the villain of the Middle East. Qatar is running the largest anti-American influence operation in history. They target the left through universities, nonprofits, activist networks, and they target the right through influencers, commentators, and media personalities who can be swayed or bought. And their goal is simple: weaken America, weaken the West, and replace our values with political Islam, the same political Islam that they've spent 40 years exporting. That is the Doha Forum, that is the truth, and it's time to call it exactly what it is. Well, a few quick stories for you today that are happening this week that I want to be sure that I mention. First, it's no surprise that the Islamic Republic of Iran has been quietly rearming its entire regional terror network. And we've gone into detail on Axis of Truth about how, but this is continuing, and you should be aware of exactly how what's happening now is not a pause for peace. It's a pause for preparation. In southern Lebanon, we have found out that new missiles and drones are flowing into Hezbollah through Syria. Now, some of these same routes that the Islamic Republic has used for years. U.S. and regional intelligence have seen increased movement of long-range drones, precision rockets, and guidance systems, all during a supposed ceasefire. Now, in Yemen, the Houthis are testing long-range drones and anti-ship missiles using Iranian components and IRGC training. The ceasefire has given them space to regroup and improve accuracy accuracy, which of course is a direct threat to global shipping as well as Israeli territory. Meanwhile, in Iraq, Iran-backed militias are receiving new funds and equipment through the popular mobilization units, money laundered through charities, mosques, and cultural centers. Now, the regime calls this civil society. We, however, call it what it is: terror infrastructure. And of course, inside Iran itself, the regime just tested dozens of ballistic missiles and cruise missiles in the Gulf of Oman, openly bragging about AI-coordinated targeting in new war games. The regime isn't de-escalating, it's upgrading. Ceasefire or not, the Islamic Republic is preparing for the next war. Well, now I want to take a closer look at footage that actually went viral this week of Iranians running in the Kish marathon, dozens of which had no hijab. Sounds amazing, right? Until the arrests start. Sadly, this reveals the regime's latest propaganda trick, the claim that Iran is opening up or modernizing or moving forward. But the reality is that this week, 2 organizers of the Kish Island Marathon were arrested for allowing women to run without hijab. That's all they did. Women ran without state-mandated covering, and the regime responded with interrogations and criminal charges. Now, these arrests came after a full regime investigation into the event, which state media claimed had violated religious principles. Now, imagine the level of control required to treat a marathon as a national security incident. And this isn't an isolated incident. Just weeks ago in Tehran, an outdoor concert was shut down after videos showed men and women standing together dancing. The regime arrested the organizers after the fact, claiming they had created an un-Islamic environment. The pattern is identical. Anytime the public shows even a small sign of normal life, the regime retaliates, all while presenting it as if Iran is modernizing. These aren't accidents, they're not misunderstandings. They're the regime's reality revealing itself. And yet we still hear Western commentators insist that there's progress in Iran, that the regime is evolving or loosening or gradually liberalizing. The Kish Marathon and the Tehran concert show exactly the opposite. The people of Iran are pushing for change, but the regime is punishing them for it at every turn. Now, the marathon was approved on paper. The concert approved on paper. Both times the regime waited until people acted like normal human beings and then came down on them with arrests and investigations. So let me be very clear. The people of Iran are changing. The regime is not. The regime is moving backwards, in some ways harder than ever. And anyone who calls this progress is repeating exactly what the Islamic Republic wants the world to believe. Don't be fooled by this. Well, last but not least, our good, bad, and ugly stories of the week. First things first, our good story this week is dedicated to the unintentionally hilarious comedy show Meltdown that is Dr. Rahmeh Aladwan's X account. Now, this unhinged lunatic spent this week whining about me, claiming Jewish supremacy is her biggest problem. This, of course, following her 15-month suspension from practicing medicine in the UK as a result of her near-daily temper tantrums, spreading anti-Semitic conspiracies, praising Hamas and October 7th, and proliferating Nazi-style dehumanizing rhetoric about Jews. No, Rahmeh, your biggest problem isn't Jews. It's your own foul mouth when you post hateful, bigoted nonsense about the Jews and then get suspended for it. That is not a conspiracy. That is a consequence. And yes, let's be very clear. If a licensed medical professional is spreading open anti-Semitism and incitement, she should lose her license. Period. Your suspension isn't an injustice, Rahmeh. It's a public service. And now today's bad story is the suspicious death of Khosrow Ali Kurdi, a respected defense attorney in Iran and a former political prisoner who was found dead in his office in Mashhad under circumstances that Iranians immediately recognized as another regime cover-up. Now, the official line was that he suffered a heart attack, but witnesses say his body showed blood from his mouth and nose and a possible skull fracture. Security forces sealed his office, removed cameras, and blocked family and colleagues from entering. Ali Kurdi had recently confided that intelligence agents were threatening him again, and he was known for defending protesters and victims of the regime, especially after the Masa Amini uprisings. Now, he stood against the Islamic Republic, and he paid the ultimate price for it, but Iranians haven't responded with silence. At his funeral, they protested with hundreds chanting for freedom and for the return of the Shah. The public has been outraged because they've seen this pattern for years. Activists, lawyers, dissidents mysteriously dying in regime custody, and everyone knows what this is. Another innocent Iranian presumably murdered for defying tyranny. And finally, the ugly story of this week. More than 200 Hollywood celebrities signed a letter demanding Israel release, wait for it, Marwan Barghouti. Yes, the founder of the Tanzim militias and a senior figure in the Second Intifada, the man convicted of multiple murders and terror attacks who's serving 5 consecutive life sentences for killing civilians. But in Hollywood, he's a political prisoner because apparently nothing says social justice like demanding freedom for a convicted terrorist who orchestrated attacks on men, women, and children. And look at some of the names who signed this letter. Academy Award winner Susan Sarandon, filmmaker Oliver Stone, actor Mark Ruffalo, all throwing their names behind a campaign to free a mass murderer they know nothing about. This is what happens when celebrities get their education from Instagram carousels and Doha-funded documentaries. They have no idea what they're talking about, but they sign everything anyway because it makes them feel enlightened. The ugly truth is the real victims of Marwan Barghouti are the families he helped destroy. He isn't a peacemaker, he has no plan for dialogue, and he's popular precisely because he is a murderer and Palestinian society is highly radicalized. Only a complete idiot could rally for the release of such a person. Well, that's a wrap for this week on Axis of Truth. I know we had a lot to cover today, but we'll be back soon with more interviews, stories, and more from the Middle East. I'm Emily Schrader. Be sure to follow me on social media, Emily K. Schrader or Emily in Tel Aviv. And thank you for watching. See you next week on Axis of Truth.